You are coming from a little bit of a Missouri background. You used to
Yes.
report in Columbia. So
Yes.
is it safe to assume that you've been in St. Louis before? What do you like about St. Louis? Just unpack that for me for a moment.
Yeah, I love St. Louis, and I'm super happy to be back. And I actually got my start, really my real start in journalism in Columbia, Missouri. And no, I didn't go to Mizzou, but it happened to be my first job. And I would sometimes on the weekends want to go see the big city. And I would want to come to St. Louis, which I did. The first baseball game I ever saw was at Busch Stadium, professional baseball game. So I have a lot of happy memories here and friends here too from those days. So it's always good to be back.
And now look at you, just absolutely cruising, cooking with gas. I want to talk about the book for a second, mostly what God wants. When you're talking about the idea, the origin story of how that happened, is it something that you've thought about your whole life? Was there a Martin Luther in the thunderstorm moment where this is the book I want to write? Just unpack where this idea came from.
No, I mean, honestly, no one is more surprised that I wrote a book like this than I am. I actually never thought I'd write a book about anything, let alone faith. But I was given the opportunity, and I couldn't quite say no. There was something so intriguing about it. And, my faith is really important to me, but it's not something I was always, wanting to go be out publicly about. I mean, it's something very private and personal. So I felt like this was the most vulnerable thing I've ever done. But I guess I felt like I had something good to say about God, and I wanted to share it. And I was really afraid to, but I did it anyway. And the greatest thing has been the response and how kind and warm and receptive and generous people have been. And what it's really taught me is that people of all different faiths or no faith at all, they want to have conversations that are deeper. They want to engage on these subjects. And I think that's been the most really just heartening surprise of the whole experience.
And that was something I want to ask for your regards. How do you identify from a religious perspective? And then again, do you think anyone, regardless of if they have a certain religious background or maybe don't have any at all, how do you identify? And then, of course, how does the book speak to the larger conversation?
Yeah, I mean, look, I grew up in the church, and the book is very much from a Christian perspective. That's my faith background. Those are my beliefs. I hope that it's a gentle call to be loved by God, and I think that it leaves a lot of space for God to connect with people. So it's not meant to be preachy or proselytizing, and I'm the last person who should do that. I'm not holding myself up as any kind of example of virtue or a life that you want to follow, and I'm no religious scholar or biblical scholar. I don't have any of that background. I'm just a regular person who has lived a regular life and had ups and downs with God and wanted to reflect on that. Because what I found out at the end of it was that mostly what God does is love you. And though that seems like a very, very simple message, it's actually, I found, quite profound and hard to put into practice sometimes, but really powerful when we can.
And you do it, I think it's very fun to read through it because it feels very personal, but then again, there is the larger overtheme. Probably my last question for you, Savannah. When we're talking about what you do in the industry, I know we personally cover a lot of shootings, a lot of house fires, so you have to read that kind of horrible news all the time as well. Yeah. Hurricanes, thunderstorms, real tragedies. So how do you conceptualize what you're seeing in the teleprompter and out in the world with where is God in this? Where is God in this tragedy?
Well, I think every single person, you don't have to be in the news business to feel like you are under assault sometimes with all of the bad news in the world and all of the things that break our hearts. And honestly, that can be a real challenge to your faith. It can make you ask that question, where is God and what is he up to? And I write a lot about that. I mean, for me, writing about those doubts or those struggles, that's part of faith. I don't consider it to be the opposite. I don't consider doubt to be the opposite of faith. I actually consider it to be faith being worked out. And I think that God welcomes those questions. So sometimes, it can be what I see around in the world, or it can be something in my own life that is disappointing or discouraging. And we have those moments where we wrestle with God or we wrestle with our faith. And I guess what I've learned over the years is that God doesn't expect us to be stoic and always sit and just say and do the right thing, but that what he really asks is that we are present to him. And I think that sometimes it's actually in those darkest times and in those hardest times that if we can bring our doubts and our questions, that sometimes what we get in response can be even more powerful than we can imagine. And I guess that's just been my experience. But again, I mean, we live in a world that's broken, and it breaks your heart every single day. And I'm hoping that this is a book that's gentle and a comfort, and maybe in some way just reminds us that no matter what, there's something larger at work, and that we're all held and loved. And I think that's a message that all of us need to hear.